The only thing I will tell you is that the government of Israel, when it started out, right, the people who took over the government were socialists, okay? And they were hoping to build a socialist utopia, right? And when it got started, and they got help, famously Stalin approved the entrance of the creation of Israel during the UN vote, right? Because he thought that they were going to make a socialist utopia. When it started to become clear to the political class of Israel that the public itself was not embracing these ideals, they did not want to create a socialist utopia. Most of the people in Israel, the Jews of Israel, are either religious or traditional, right, on some level, but not anti like the government is. Okay. At some point, which I think to be somewhere in the late 70s, early 80s, they decided we have to dismantle Israel. So the leadership has been gradually making Israel such a hostile place, because the point is, well, now it's time to dismantle Jews living in Israel. If it's not going to be a socialist utopia, it's time to, finish the product. The project, excuse me. We can't have them living here, okay, unless it's on our terms, okay? Because initially, all the socialists, even before, like in the middle 1800s to the early 1900s, were against Jewish migration to Israel, and many Jews were migrating from Europe. Actually, for hundreds of years, were migrating from Europe to the land of Israel, right? And they were against it. And then when they saw that they weren't going to be able to stop the waves of migration, like, we got to take over. Okay, so that's a basic history of the last 300 years of Jews living in Israel. Okay, so I think that, in my view, that's what's happening. That's really the only explanation for how it appears, for people who don't want to believe that this was intentional, then the level of incompetence of the political class of Israel, even if you wanted to accept the fact that it's just incompetence, like it was incompetence that allowed Hamas to break into to those Jewish towns, right, and to commit those slaughters. I believe if you think that was incompetence, you're in a dream world. But let's say, hypothetically, fine, yeah, it was incompetence. That level of incompetence needs to be obviously punished. I can't understand how that could even be tolerated. Like, I was working as I never got to be an electrician. I was an apprentice, right, on construction sites. The electricians, the journeymen, as they call themselves, right?
Yeah.
They were to wire up something, right, where people have access to. Let's say like a bus stop. You know how they have advertisements and lights on bus stops?
Yeah.
If an electrician wired it correctly and someone was harmed because of it, he would go to jail.
Wow.
Okay, so I don't understand how people who cause that much destruction through incompetence have a job. So that's what I want.
There's no incompetence to me, Frank. I mean, in Israel, they have underground sensors, they have on-the-wall sensors, they have air sensors, they've got the Iron Dome, they've got, how did paragliders literally fly in and drop in like Mad Max of Thunderdome and go undetected for 7 hours while they went door to door, ravaging and savaging and killing people and destroying an entire museum? How does any of this happen? How do they cut a hole in a wall? When you have ground sensors that can feel vibrations from across the planet? It makes zero sense, unless, of course, it was completely by design. And it was to allow us, like World War II, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, to drag a country into a war. And immediately America sends the fleet there. I'm going to call out some neocons like Sebastian Gorka and Dan Crenshaw, who are showing images of what they claim to be burned and beheaded babies to get Americans ginned up, when we, unfortunately, don't even have the ability to defend our own country. How are we going to be everywhere all at once when we have a war going in Taiwan, Ukraine? I mean, Frank, this is insanity right now. At what point?
I just want to tell you. I want to tell you that I'm not going to speak for anyone, but I can just tell you from my personal experience, the non-political class, the majority of Jews in Israel, what that means is just the people
they love
and the soldiers, okay?
Right.
And the mid-levels don't need anyone to come to put a boot on the ground. They're not happy to do it, but they're fully capable of getting rid of their enemies. And they're not
agree.
As you can see, they're not even being allowed to.
No.
There's a very high spirit. They want to rid themselves of this evil. And you could see that the political class and the top brass is stalling. and they're giving ridiculous excuses which don't make sense, and no country would ever do this. Okay,
No.